Jerusalem attained her greatest splendor at any time in history during the period of the Herodian dynasty, from the reign of Herod himself 37 to 4 BC until the destruction of the city and the temple in 70 AD. As people said then, whoever has not seen Jerusalem in her splendor has never seen a beautiful city. I made a 3D model of Jerusalem to illustrate the beauty of Jerusalem in the 1st century AD. This model is based on the Holy Land model of Jerusalem that you can see in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. My model is not as extensive as the Holy Land model and does not include the third wall and the structures within the area of the third wall. For more than 100 years, scholars have debated the location of the third wall, and still there is little archaeological evidence that would give a decisive answer as to its extent. Therefore, I decided not to include the third wall in my model. As you look at my model, you can see different sections of the city and characteristic structures that we will mention in more detail in this presentation. The city can be divided into sections that include the city of David, the lower city, the upper city, the Essene quarter, and the new city quarter. Additionally, you can see the characteristic structures such as the Pool of Siloam, Serpent's Pool, Herod's Palace, Hashmonian Palace, possible site of Golgotha 1, possible site of Golgotha 2, Antonia Fortress, Pool of Bethesda, the temple area, and Queen Helen of Abedin Palace. Currently we are looking from south towards north. Here you can see the Mount of Olives, the Kidron Valley, the Tyropean Valley, and the Hinnom Valley. And this is a modern landscape of Jerusalem. Where you can also see the Mount of Olives, the City of David, the Temple Mount, and the Old City covering most of the ancient lower and upper city of Jerusalem. So let's begin our journey from the Pool of Siloam. The Pool of Siloam is located at the bottom of the city of David. The pool was rediscovered during an excavation work for a sewer in autumn of 2004 by Ir David Foundation workers following a request and directions given by archaeologists Eli Shukron, accompanied by Ori Orbach from the Israel Nature and Parks Authority. Archaeologists Eli Shukron and Ronnie Reich, working with the Israel Antiquities Authority, uncovered stone steps, and it became obvious that these steps were likely to have been part of the Second Temple period pool. Excavations commenced and confirmed the initial suppositions. The find was formally announced on August 9, 2005, and received substantial international media attention. The Pool of Siloam was built during the reign of Hezekiah to leave besieging armies without access to the spring's water. The pool was fed by the newly constructed Siloam Tunnel. An older Canaanite tunnel had been very vulnerable to attackers, so under the threat from the Assyrian king Sanherib, Hezekiah sealed up the old outlet of the Gihon Spring and built a new underground Siloam tunnel in place of the older tunnel. The pool remained in use during the time of Yeshua According to the Gospel of John, Yeshua sent a blind man from birth to the pool in order to complete his healing. As the freshwater reservoir, the pool would have been a major gathering place for ancient Jews making religious pilgrimages to the city. Next, we have the city of David. The eastern hill on which David built his palace and the capital of Israel lost its significance as the main city life moved to the western hill. Josephus speaks of large palace structures on the eastern hill built by Queen Helen of Adiabene. The people of Mesopotamia built brick palaces which were completely different from all other buildings in the city. The other big building shown on this model is the Synagogue of the Friedman. This building has not been found, but Raymond Weil found an inscription referring to a synagogue built by Theodos, son of Vetanos, suggesting that the building was located in this area. As we move north, you can see the Saturn Temple entrance and exit called the Hulda Gates. I will not spend much time on the gates leading to the Temple Mount, as I made a special video explaining each gate in detail. I will put a link to this presentation in the description to this movie, so check it out. On top of Mount Moriah, we have the magnificent temple built by Herod. The city derived its main glory and status from the temple, around which its life revolved. At that time, the Jews were the only people whose religion required them to have a unique religious cultural center. The temple, therefore, became the sole focus of the entire nation. Multitudes of pilgrims visited it 3 times a year, sometimes as many as 100,000 pilgrims at a time. Jerusalem, at the eve of its destruction, had a population of 150,000 or perhaps even more. The Temple Mount was famed not only for its size, but also for its engineering and architectural achievements. Among the inventions and innovations introduced were bridges to relieve traffic congestion and underground entry tunnels with ceiling carved by the best stone masons. The temple area can be divided into the temple building, the temple court, the court of women, the soreg, a special fence beyond which Gentiles were not allowed, the court of Gentiles, and the royal stoa. The royal stoa was a majestic basilica that rose in the southern part of the Temple Mount, covering an area of 10,000 square meters, 50 by 200 meters. Of course, the temple requires a much better introduction, but it's a topic for another video, as in this material I am giving a general overview of Jerusalem. Here you can see a bridge connecting the Temple Mount with the Mount of Olives. According to the Mishnah, the ceremony of burning the red heifer took place on the Mount of Olives. The bridge was used so that the priests would not touch any dead bodies, as the cemeteries were located below. The Mount of Olives was also the location of the Garden of Gethsemane, where the olive trees were planted and olives were pressed to receive olive oil. Today, in this garden, you can still find olive trees that are almost 1,000 years old. Attached to the northern walls of the temple area, you can also see a large pool. This is the so-called Pool of Israel, believed to have been built by Romans for use as a water reservoir and also to protect the northern wall of the Temple Mount. Next, we have the Pool of Bethesda. Today, the remains of this pool are associated with the site of the pool in the current Muslim quarter of the city, near the gate now called the Lion's Gate or St. Stephen's Gate, and the Church of St. Anne that was excavated in the late 19th century. The name of the pool is said to be derived from the Hebrew or Aramaic language. Bethesda means either house of mercy or house of grace. In the Gospel of John chapter 5, we read that during the Shabbat, the site was visited by Yeshua, during which he heals a man who has been bedridden for many years and could not make his own way into the pool. A very important structure was also Fort Antonia, on the northern western side of the temple. I will not spend much time on Antonia Fortress, as I have also made a video discussing the structure and its location. If you would like to learn more, check out the link in the description of this video. For now, I will just mention a few things. The Antonia Fortress was a citadel built by Herod the Great and named for Herod's patron Mark Antony as a fortress whose chief function was to protect the Second Temple. The fortress housed some part of the Roman garrison of Jerusalem. It is also believed that the area around the fortress also functioned as a space to hold barracks for additional Roman soldiers. Archaeologists have found the Strophion pool that would have provided water for the Roman soldiers garrisoned here. Traditionally, Christians have believed for centuries that the vicinity of the Antonia Fortress was the site of Pontius Pilate Praetorium, where Jesus was tried for high treason. This was based on the assumption that an area of the Roman flagstones discovered beneath the Church of the Condemnation and the Covenant of the Sisters of Zion was the pavement which John 19:13 describes as the location of Jesus' trial. Going west and north, we have the traditional location that some Christians believe was the location of Golgotha. Today, this site is located north of the old city of the modern Jerusalem, close to the Damascus Gate. The Garden Tomb is a rock-cut tomb in Jerusalem, which was unearthed in 1867. The Garden Tomb is adjacent to a rocky escarpment which today stands above an Arab bus station. Since 1894, the Garden Tomb and its surrounding gardens have been maintained as a place of Protestant worship and reflection by a Protestant non-denomination charitable trust fund based in the United Kingdom named the Garden Tomb Association. As such, the Garden Tomb stands as a popular site of pilgrimage for many Christians, especially evangelical Anglicans and other Protestants. I will make a separate video dealing with the location of Golgotha, therefore I will not spend more time on this site in this video. To the west of the Temple Mount, we have another possible location of Golgotha. Today, on this site, we have the famous Church of the Holy Sepulchre, located in the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. I made a presentation about this church and the tradition connected to it, so make sure you check it out. I am leaving a link in the description of this film. As we move south, you can see the 3 towers built by Herod the Great. The towers were named after important people in Herod's life: Hippicus, a friend, Faisal, his brother, and Mariamne, his wife. According to Josephus, the Roman general Titus destroyed the entire city but decided to save Herod's 3 towers and a section of the western city wall because he wanted to show Jerusalem's former strength, and he had soldiers stationed there using its living quarters. One of Herod's towers remains standing today. It has a solid base, and the top part was rebuilt by the Mamluks in the 15th century. It is sometimes called the Tower of David, but it was built by Herod and it is unrelated to David. Scholars disagree over the identification of this tower. Some believe that this was the Faisal Tower, and others believe it was the Hippicus Tower. At the top of the upper city, Herod the Great built a luxurious palace. In comparison with today's old city, Herod's palace stretched from the area of the Jaffa Gate to the southwest corner of the old city walls. The size is estimated to be 1050 times 415 feet or 330 by 130 meters. The palace was built on an elevated platform, archaeological evidence of which has been found in excavations in the so-called Citadel of David. The platform was made of series of retaining walls, 13 to 16 feet 4 to 5 meters above ground level. Excavations by Amiran and Aiton revealed some parts of the superstructure, which included sections of painted plaster. The construction of the podium covered over some remains of the Hashmonian buildings. The palace had 2 main wings, named after Agrippa and Caesar, 2 important friends of King Herod. Each wing had its own banquet halls, baths, and accommodations for hundreds of guests. The palace was surrounded by groves of trees, canals, and ponds, and studded with bronze fountains. Philo and Josephus testified that the Roman governors stayed in Herod's palace while they were in Jerusalem and carried out their trials on the pavement immediately outside it. Archaeologists therefore conclude that in the 1st century the praetorium, the residence of the governor, was in the former royal palace on the western hill rather than at Antonia Fortress on the opposite side of the city. However, as the tradition retained its power in associating the fortress with Yeshua trial, the place where it once stood serves as the starting point of the Via Dolorosa commemorating the crucifixion of Yeshua. The last 2 structures on this model that I would like to mention is the Palace of Annas and Caiaphas and the Hashmonian Palace. Known as the Palacial Mansion because of its unusually large size, it is now part of the restored Herodian quarter. This structure contained 4 ritual baths, one evidently built to serve a number of people, with 1 door for entry and 1 for exit. This, coupled with the traces of great conflagration found in the Palacian Mansion, point to the possible identification of this residence with the palace of Annas, the high priest. Josephus records Annas' palace as having been burned in 70 AD. Lastly, we have the Hashmonian Palace in the city, located in the upper city opposite to the Temple Mount. Attempts to locate the Hashmonian Palace archaeologically have not been successful, though some have identified the palace with the one of the houses excavated by Nachman Avigad in the Herodian quarter. Few agree with this identification. This concludes our tour of Jerusalem in the 1st century AD. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. As always, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel to receive information about new episodes on the Israel My channel. You can also support this channel by becoming a patron of the channel. If you go to the Israel My channel main page, click the Patron button that will redirect you to the Patron page. It took hundreds of hours to create this model, but I hope it will serve for future presentations where we will discover Jerusalem together. I am also working on other models from different time periods, so expect more coming. Have a great day and Shalom!